welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
So you're here because you want to, really get to the heart of Chris Guillebeau's The Art of Non-Conformity.
Yeah, exactly.
You want those practical insights on how to challenge expectations and live life on your own terms. But let's be real. Who has time to read every single book?
I mean, that's where we come in, right?
Yeah.
You know, you shared this book with us, and what really struck me is how Guillebeau directly tackles this pressure we all feel to just kind of fit in.
Yeah, totally.
So in this deep dive, we're going to extract those crucial bits of wisdom on how to set your own rules, how to not be totally frozen by fear, and, maybe even how to rethink work and education.
Yeah. And right from the get-go, he uses this really powerful image, a bridge, and everyone else is jumping off it.
Right.
The question, maybe from your parents, is, why aren't you jumping?
Right.
But Guillebeau kind of flips it around. He suggests that society is kind of implicitly asking, hey, everyone else is jumping, so why aren't you?
That's such a great point. It's like that pressure to conform. It's almost like it's in the air we breathe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Guillebeau isn't just saying don't jump. He's really asking you to think critically about why that bridge is even there in the first place.
It makes you question everything.
Absolutely. And this gets us to the very heart of his message. You don't have to live your life the way other people expect you to.
So simple, yet when you really internalize that, it can change your whole outlook.
Right. And to really get the most out of this conversation, just like with the book, Guillebeau outlines a few important mindsets you need to have. First, you got to be genuinely open to new ideas, even if they challenge your current worldview.
And second, a bit of, a healthy dissatisfaction with the status quo.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're completely content with everything in your life, the whole concept of non-conformity might not be so appealing.
Totally.
Yeah.
And third, a willingness to take personal responsibility.
Absolutely. If you want to forge your own path, you got to own your decisions, both the good and the not so good.
Definitely. And finally, a willingness to put in the work.
Yeah. I mean, living life on your own terms, it's not necessarily easier. It often requires a different kind of effort,
Sure.
An effort that's aligned with your values and your own personal goals.
Okay, so let's jump into this whole idea of setting your own terms. Guillebeau really emphasizes this concept of life planning.
Yeah.
And he stresses that this is actually even more important than planning individual events.
Right. So it's not just about planning your next vacation.
Exactly.
This is about the big picture. And what's important for you to grasp here is the contrast with what he calls life avoidance. So many of us, we just kind of drift through life.
Day to day.
Exactly, day to day, without a clear sense of what we really want,
Right.
Life planning, it's about being deliberate. It's about consciously choosing a direction for your life instead of just letting things happen to you.
Yeah. And this leads into his idea of radical goal setting. And this isn't your typical New Year's resolution list.
Right.
This is about creating what he calls a life list. It's like a no-holds-barred bucket list of everything you want to experience, everything you want to achieve before your time is up.
Yeah. It's like, what's your ultimate list of things you want to do in this life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting is you start to see patterns in what kind of things people who embrace this unconventional life planning, what they really value versus what they actively try to eliminate.
Yeah.
So on let's call it the what's in list, there's a real emphasis on things like spending quality time with loved ones and having dedicated time for thinking, for strategizing and planning. And they prioritize doing work that really fulfills them, that brings them a sense of purpose.
Right, not just a paycheck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, you see the big adventure and travel goals popping up frequently.
Yeah.
But then there are also these deeply personal aspirations, things that might not make sense to anyone else, but they're hugely important to that individual.
Yeah.
And it's about honoring those things. And on the flip side, the what's out list, it's all about consciously getting rid of unnecessary drama. Those busy work tasks that don't actually get you anywhere, schedules that are entirely dictated by other people, and, those obligations that we only do out of a sense of guilt or obligation.
Yeah, you just feel like you should.
Exactly. It's a deliberate effort to make space for what truly matters to you.
So if we connect all of this back to the bigger picture, I'm sure you've noticed, there are people who seem to accomplish a remarkable amount in a short period of time.
Oh, yeah.
And Guillebeau argues it's not always about some superhuman discipline.
Right.
Often it's about having that really clear vision of what they want and treating their ambitions seriously.
Yeah, that focus and intention, it can really speed things up in ways you wouldn't expect.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Living life on your own terms doesn't have to be a selfish pursuit.
Yeah.
In fact, the book highlights how many nonconformists use their chosen path to make a bigger, more positive impact on the world.
Yeah.
But it also acknowledges that, when you start living authentically, not everyone's going to get it.
Yeah, not everyone's going to understand your choices.
Exactly. And Guillebeau argues that that's okay.
Yeah, their disapproval doesn't invalidate your path.
And to illustrate this point, he shares the story of Bernard Lopez.
Oh, yeah, Bernard, what a story.
He was in this comfortable corporate job in New York City for 8 years. And then, bam, he quits, breaks his apartment lease, uses his retirement savings to buy a bicycle and ride across America.
Wow.
He called it an indispensable decision.
Yeah.
A moment where he consciously chose uncertainty and personal growth over that perceived security of the traditional path.
I think for you, the listener, Bernard's story really emphasizes the power of taking that bold step when you know deep down what's truly important to you.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about another big hurdle we all face when considering a less conventional path: fear.
Oh, yeah, fear.
We got to talk about it. And the book makes it very clear that fear is not something we can just eliminate.
Right.
It's normal, it's human. The goal isn't to be fearless, but to learn how to navigate those fears that are holding you back.
Exactly. And I think what's really helpful is the perspective shared by Sloan Barrett.
Yeah.
She did some volunteer work in the Philippines, and she said, I'm scared every day. But here's the thing. I've also realized that fear is normal. I use my fear to hone my intuition.
Wow, I love that.
Right. So it's not about letting fear paralyze you. It's about recognizing it, being aware of it, and using that heightened awareness to make smarter decisions.
Yeah. Guillebeau then breaks down 3 specific fears that tend to pop up when we're considering stepping outside the box.
Okay, let's hear them.
So you have the fear of failure.
Pretty common one.
Yeah. Then you have the fear of success.
That one can be sneaky.
Right. And this one's often subconscious, and it can be surprisingly powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, of course, there's the fear of change itself. And he argues that more often than not, it's the fear of change that really trips us up.
That makes sense. Change can be scary.
And this ties into another principle he talks about. People tend to resist change, even if their current situation isn't great.
Yeah.
And they'll resist it until the pain of staying the same outweighs the perceived pain of making that change.
We're creatures of comfort, you know?
The book illustrates this with a really relatable story about someone who was going through this huge apartment renovation.
Okay.
And they were essentially urban camping in their own place. And then the final straw, a water outage.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no running water.
That's tough.
It was only then, when the discomfort became unbearable, that they finally decided to move spontaneously to a new state.
It's like it took that extreme situation to push them over the edge.
Exactly. And then the book contrasts this with the experiences of 2 guys, Sean and Aaron. So Sean was super unhappy in his job as a financial analyst. He was so committed to making a change that he even sold his car.
Wow.
Like, he made this tangible commitment to a different lifestyle. Whereas Aaron, he talked about wanting change. He even asked for advice, but he stayed stuck.
It's the difference between wanting something and actually taking action, right?
Exactly. And to help break through that fear of the unknown, Guillebeau gives us this really practical tool, the worst-case question.
Oh, I like this one.
Yeah. It's about asking yourself, what's the absolute worst thing that could realistically happen?
Yeah.
And by doing that, you often demystify those big, scary decisions and make them feel more manageable.
It puts things in perspective.
He shares a personal example of accidentally double-booking himself on non-refundable flights to Tokyo.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but he realized it was inconvenient, sure, but it wasn't a catastrophe.
That's a good point.
And then there's this anecdote about the 16 months he spent preparing to do video updates.
Okay.
And he had this huge fear of being on camera.
Understandable.
But by consistently pushing through that discomfort, he ended up having some amazing unexpected opportunities, like being featured on CNN and NBC.
Wow. See, the lesson here is, by facing your fears and working through them, you often open yourself up to possibilities you never imagined.
Exactly. So the key takeaways here. Fear is normal. The motivation to change has to be stronger than the desire to stay comfortable. Many remarkable people have overcome their fears, and asking yourself that worst-case question can be incredibly powerful.
All right, let's shift gears again and talk about those external obstacles that often pop up when you're doing something different.
Yeah.
We're talking about taking on gatekeepers and critics.
And the book uses Tim DeChristopher's story, where he disrupts this land auction.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a great example of challenging authority.
Tell me about it.
So he basically walks into this auction for oil and gas leases, but he has no intention of actually buying anything.
Interesting.
But he ends up bidding on and winning 13 parcels of land, thousands of acres, for a fraction of their value.
Wow.
His whole goal was to stop the sale from happening.
I mean, talk about a David and Goliath story in real life.
And of course, he faced legal consequences,
Yeah.
but the land ended up being protected.
What's particularly insightful here is the response you often hear from these gatekeepers when their authority is challenged.
Right.
Guillebeau highlights two that come up all the time. That dismissive, just because, that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
And then there's that seemingly benevolent for the good of the people, which is basically saying any change will have negative consequences for everyone.
Right, even if things could be so much better.
And here's where that David and Goliath analogy gets really interesting.
Okay.
The book cites research that shows in conventional warfare, the established power, the Goliath, wins most of the time. However, when the underdog, the David, uses unconventional tactics, the odds almost completely flip. The underdog is actually more likely to win. That's a huge takeaway for anyone thinking about challenging the status quo. You don't necessarily need those traditional advantages.
You don't need permission or tons of experience.
Exactly. You don't need years of preparation or mountains of paperwork.
Okay, so what do we need?
What you do need is a deep conviction in your cause. You need the courage to actually take action, a strong commitment to your goals, and a genuine purpose driving your efforts.
Yeah, those qualities can be much more powerful than we realize.
Now let's talk about work and career. The book really challenges those traditional ideas of job security. Guillebeau suggests that in today's world, your best security is your own competence and adaptability.
He actually criticizes those 100 ways to make money in the recession lists that pop up when the economy takes a hit.
Oh, yeah.
He points out that so many of them focus on, low-level temporary jobs, and they even sometimes discourage entrepreneurship. He argues that taking control of your income through your skills and initiative can be less risky than relying solely on an employer.
It's about taking ownership, right?
Exactly. And shifting your mindset to be proactive. So instead of just reacting to external events, it's about changing how you interpret those events and taking action to shape your own circumstances.
It's about being the driver, not the passenger.
And the book highlights that most successful entrepreneurs don't make it big on their first try.
Yeah, it's about trial and error.
They start multiple businesses, they learn, they iterate.
It's a process.
And then he introduces this idea of location-independent businesses.
Okay, what's that?
These are ventures that aren't tied to a specific location. They can be run online.
Gotcha.
And the book shares some amazing examples of small startups that started with very little. One literally began with $50 in a bottle of oil. Another, retro razor, started with less than $80.
That's inspiring.
It really shows you that you don't need a ton of capital to get started. And then there's Alan Bacon's story and his life experiments.
Oh, yeah.
By constantly taking action and experimenting with different skills, he was able to make bigger, more fulfilling changes in his life. He even ended up living in Paris for a while.
That's pretty cool.
His story shows that those smaller steps can lead to significant results in the long run.
I like that.
And then there's Susan's boss hunting strategy.
Boss hunting.
Instead of applying for jobs, she set up a website where employers could apply to hire her.
That's thinking outside the box.
And it worked.
Right.
She got multiple job offers, even during a tough economic period.
Wow. That's a great example of creating your own opportunities.
And then there's this anecdote about the failed fulfillment center.
Oh, no.
Yeah, things went really wrong. But the key takeaway is that you can bounce back from setbacks.
You can learn from your mistakes.
Exactly. And the experience actually makes you more resilient and confident.
I think the key is, like you were saying earlier, to focus on what you're building toward, not just what you're trying to escape.
Exactly. Have a vision for where you want to go. And finally, let's talk about how the book rethinks education, specifically comparing traditional grad school with, learning and building expertise online.
Okay.
Guillebeau really challenges why people automatically go to grad school.
Yeah, it's often just the expected next step, right?
He actually shares his own non-traditional academic path. He skipped high school, went to community college, and then a state university. And His experience highlights this potential disconnect between the skills emphasized in traditional education, memorization, playing the game, versus the skills that are actually valuable for making a real impact in the world.
Yeah, I mean, what are we really learning?
The book then compares the cost, the number of peers you interact with, the potential for becoming a recognized expert, and the overall outcomes of a traditional graduate program, specifically using the University of Washington's International Studies program with its $32,000 price tag
Yeah.
with the alternative.
Yeah.
Building an audience and demonstrating your expertise by writing online.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
Guillebeau uses his own website, chrisguillebeau.com, as a case study.
And that obviously worked for him. I mean, he wrote this book, right?
Right. And then he introduces this really intriguing idea, the one-year, self-directed, alternative graduate school experience.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
This isn't meant to replace traditional education for everyone, but it's a much more affordable way to gain knowledge and skills in areas that truly interest you.
Sounds interesting.
And he provides some concrete examples of what this might look like. Dedicate time to reading important religious texts. Use language learning podcasts to become fluent. Do something hands-on, like loan money through Kiva. Explore a wide range of topics by reading random Wikipedia pages.
That's kind of fun.
Focus on developing your writing skills. Expand your knowledge by tackling a book like The Know-It-All. And the estimated cost for this whole year of self-directed learning, around $10,000 or less.
Wow. A fraction of the cost of a traditional master's degree.
Right. And of course, there are valid concerns about this approach.
Yeah.
No formal degree, no career services, potentially missing out on that traditional campus experience. But for many people, the depth of knowledge gained, the freedom to learn on their own terms, and the significantly lower cost might outweigh those factors.
It really comes down to personal priorities.
Yeah, you have to choose the path that aligns with your own goals and values.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the central message from The Art of Non-Conformity is this. You have the power to create a life that truly reflects your values and your dreams.
Even if it means forging a path that looks very different from what's expected.
Exactly. We've uncovered some pretty surprising facts, and hopefully we've given you some practical takeaways, from strategies for taking control of your life, overcoming fear, and rethinking how you engage with norms, to building security through your own competence, and even how you approach learning.
Yeah. And to leave you with something to think about, an idea that comes up later in the book about legacy, it's not just about whether or not you decide to jump off that metaphorical bridge.
Right. What kind of bridge do you want to build for others to cross?
I like that.
What impact do you want to make?
Food for thought. We encourage you to reflect on what resonated with you most from this conversation. Maybe it sparked your interest enough to check out The Art of Non-Conformity for yourself.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.